Rafayel, Anecdote 1, A Unique Vermillion. Chapter 1, Unfinished Work. Thomas's art exhibition begins in a week. Raphael's art covers almost all of the walls except for one. Thomas announced that on the opening day, Raphael's magnum opus would be there. However, until then, no one could see it, not even his sponsors. Of course, only Thomas knows that. Raphael's magnum opus is still. He finally finds Raphael in the storage room after running around for a long time. Thomas stops to catch his breath. He wipes the sweat off his forehead with one hand and airs himself with the collar. "You're here, not going to take a bath today?" Raphael doesn't spare Thomas a glance, his eyes focused on the building in front of him. It's a fortress made from thousands of identical pieces of fishbone, each tower a different height. "I knew you'd bother me, so I locked the bathroom door from the inside, but then I forgot to go in." Raphael weighs the small bone in his hand, thinks for a bit, then places it on the top left corner of the fortress. Thomas furrows his brow. "And the key?" "I don't know." "Fish brain," Thomas mutters. He takes note of what Raphael is building. "You haven't even finished your painting yet. Why are you making this?" "Maybe it's because I can't paint right now." Feeling anxious, Thomas feels any work of Raphael's is a masterpiece. He takes a step. "This is pretty good. Why don't we use this as your final piece? People can also see our great painter's installation art." Raphael glanced at him. "You want me to rebuild this at the exhibition? It's 2,000 pieces. I don't have that much time." Thomas deflates like a balloon. He massages his temples and says, "The sponsors called me again today. They're very worried about the situation regarding the final piece. I know you don't care about these things, but it's not just about you. It's also about my reputation. I can't. We can't mess this up." Raphael picks up a large fishbone, holds it in the air, then puts it back on the table. He focuses on the building, completely ignoring Thomas. Seeing Raphael ignore him, Thomas becomes exasperated and says, "You've been painting for a while. Why don't you let me take a look?" Inside the studio, a painting as tall as the wall is covered in wet paint, filling the air with a smell of minerals. Thomas fancies himself as someone who understands art, but if he's being honest with himself, he can't tell what's missing from this piece. It's already good enough. Thomas snaps back from his daze and asks, "Isn't this already perfect?" "It's missing a color." Raphael massages his temples, looking distressed. "Without that, this painting isn't complete." "Is one color really important? It's already pretty stunning. Why don't we just display this first, then add the color after?" Thomas withdraws himself from the painting, his mind filled with many thoughts. "Paintings I haven't finished will never be released to the public." Raphael glances at Thomas's expression. "Don't even think about it. If you move this painting, I'll burn it." Thomas purses his lips. "You're a man of your word." "Fine, but there has to be a deadline. How about 2 days? Or 3? I can't give you any more than that." Closing his eyes, Raphael nods. Chapter 2, Missing Color. 3 days pass in a blink of an eye. Thomas still hasn't heard from Raphael. With no other alternatives, he returns to the island. On the beach not so far away, a thick branch dances across the sand. The man holding it stands up from time to time to look at the drawing. "I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Everything is ready. Why would I lie to you?" Thomas shifts his phone from left to right, then right to left. You know his temper. No one can see the painting until the opening of the exhibition. You're the same. Ending his call with the sponsor's manager, Thomas walks towards the man drawing on the beach. It's been 3 days, Thomas says when he's close to Raphael. Mr. Artist, we have 4 days left until the exhibition. What are you doing? Did you go blind already? Raphael stands up and props the branch up with his right hand. At his feet, a drawing of the sea is in the sand. If only you drew at this exhibition. What's the point of having it here? After admiring his work, Thomas quickly asks, Did you find that color? Raphael slams the stick into the sand twice. If I did, I wouldn't be drawing here, he says, slightly frustrated. Sighing, Thomas puts his hands on his waist. Let's go to my friend's pigment factory. There are thousands of colors there. You're bound to find one you want. No, Raphael says. Those have been chosen countless times by other people. I will never let them be in my paintings. Thomas sighs. I knew you would be like this. I wouldn't have suggested this if I could afford to wait any longer. Chuckling, he continues in a wistful tone. You were like this when we first met. Looking up at the endless blue sea, Thomas closes his eyes. I remember back then, I compared myself to you. Thomas recalls that time when he was still passionate about art. Chapter 3. Passionate Colors. At a charity event, his painting just so happened to be displayed alongside Raphael's. Thomas had heard of Raphael before. He thought he stood a chance against him. If his painting sold for a price higher than Raphael's, then he would become famous overnight. With that thought, Thomas went to the exhibit early. This time, their works were quite similar in tone. Comparing the two, he noticed Raphael's was more unique. Yet, he didn't want to admit it. Thomas always thought his work was better than everyone else's. But those who appreciated the two paintings only admired Raphael's and ignored Thomas's. Thomas reassured himself. These people only care about Raphael's name. They didn't know anything about the true meaning of art. Near the end of the exhibit, an old man approached the paintings. Thomas recognized this old man as a famous art collector. Finally! Someone who knew art. When the old man stopped in front of the two paintings, his eyes only looked at Raphael's piece. Such a passionate color. Only Mr. Raphael could convey emotions like this. Thomas was consumed by jealousy. Mr. Thomas's painting is good too, right? The old man took his glasses off. He glanced at Thomas's painting, waved his hand, and said, The red's off. Thomas's painting wasn't sold for a good price that night. It was the same night he decided to let himself visit Raphael. Raphael only let him in when he heard Thomas was also an artist. That was the first time Thomas met him. Thomas wanted to have an artistic discussion with Raphael about colors, but Raphael didn't seem interested. He just sat at his desk mixing colors in paper cups. Thomas asked if he knew his painting sold at a high price. Without lifting his head, Raphael asked, Which one? The one at the charity event. Oh. At his lukewarm response, Thomas was confused. Do you not want to know how much you sold it for? As long as it benefits the charity, I don't care how much money it makes, Raphael said, then mumbled something about paint lacking something. He picked up his brush and looked for some color on his palette. Recalling the old man's critic, Thomas asked, Which brand of paint did you use? As if he'd never heard that word before, Raphael finally looked up at Thomas. Brands? Worried that Raphael wouldn't tell him, Thomas decided to lay out his choice of paints first. Madeline, Bailey, Curro, those are the brands I use. I'll trade some with you. Raphael stirred the contents of the paper cup with a small brush. It took him a while to say, Thanks, but I can make it myself. Thomas took a deep breath. Is this the attitude of a famous artist? How did you make the red in your painting then? he asked. Raphael made a line on the piece of paper with the paints from the paper cup. Satisfied, he looked up at Thomas again. Are you here because you want to learn from me? Hearing this, Thomas felt a little irritated, but he knew that to learn the truth, he had to let go of his pride. If you tell me, I'll make you even more famous. Raphael took the paint he mixed to his canvas. I don't paint for fame. Thomas returned to the present, opening his eyes to gaze about how the waves lapped on the sand. He feels sentimental. After that, I studied business to become your manager. To be honest with you, I was stunned the first time I saw your work. I couldn't believe that someone as talented as you existed. So, I believe in your talent. You wouldn't be stopped by an artist block. You'd. Turning back, Thomas' words stopped in his throat. Raphael's figure moves further and further away, eventually becoming a small dot in the distance. Chapter 5 Drastic Measures. With 2 days left until the exhibition, Thomas decides to take matters into his own hands. Darkness covers the sea and the island, and the studio is lit up by the moonlight filtering through the window. Thomas sneaks inside. He glances around, and when he doesn't see any signs of Raphael, he fixes his gaze on the giant painting leaning against the wall. His footsteps are silent as he moves towards it. He puts on the gloves he brought with him, kneels, and tries to pick up the painting. Right at this moment, someone comes out from the shadows. The air is filled with the sound of a match being lit. Thomas shouts, What are you doing with that match? Raphael glares at Thomas. If that painting moves even 1 centimeter, I will light it on fire. Okay, fine, don't do it. Thomas takes several steps back. Raphael, match in hand, stands near the painting. His gaze doesn't leave Thomas. With the match so close to the painting, Thomas's heart almost jumps out of his chest. Hurriedly, he says, I moved it at most 9 millimeters. It hasn't moved a centimeter. You can see it for yourself. Raphael's gaze shifts, but he doesn't look at the painting. Rather, he stares at Thomas's feet. Move, you're stepping on my conch. The wooden board Raphael has slept on since noon rests on the corner. Thomas turns on the light and moves it aside. How can you even sleep on it? Are you seriously doing this just so you can guard your painting? The light flickers on. Thomas notices what Raphael is holding. A conch. He's never seen it before. He clicks his tongue, puts his arms on his waist, and glares at Raphael. There are 2 days left until the exhibition, and you're here trying seafood? Raphael looks at Thomas for a few moments before he says, Do you think of nothing else than eating nature's creations when you see them? Thomas takes a moment to think. You want to use it as paint? Yup. Raphael wipes the conch with the utmost care. The color I need might be in here. Thomas, after a moment of shock, grabs Raphael's arm. Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and start painting! Raphael pulls his arm away and says, I can't paint right now. It'll take me at least 3 days to get the paint out. 3 days? Thomas felt as though he had been struck by lightning. Taking deep breaths, he asks, Is it possible to extract the color in 1 day? Raphael pats Thomas's shoulder. Nope. Excitement fades from Thomas's face. On the night before the exhibition, Thomas calls Raphael for the 10th time, but to no avail. He takes a deep breath. He knew he would be like this. Thankfully, Thomas has a plan. It's not the greatest plan, but at this rate, he has to give it a go. Chapter 6 A Unique Legend. It's been 3 days since the end of the exhibition. A mountain of conches sit in the corner of the studio, leading up to an assortment of paints. Pieces of conch shells are scattered across the floor. In his left hand, a roughly thumb-sized blotch of color stands out among his colorful palette. Thomas drifts into Raphael's studio with a smile. He sits at the coffee table and pours himself a cup of coffee. Glancing at Raphael, he says, still smiling, You don't need to keep painting. The exhibition is over. Raphael doesn't turn around. He drags his brush across the painting. I hung a frame on the wall, gave it a strange name, and called it a day. Everyone who came said it was the pinnacle of art. Who knew that a magnum opus could be so easily replaced with a frame? Maybe I still have some artistic talent in me. Seeing Raphael ignore him, Thomas' excitement fades. Putting down his coffee, Thomas goes up to Raphael and looks at his painting. There are a few more touches of reddish purple in Raphael's painting. It's the same bright color that's on his palette. Thomas furrows his brow. Is this the color you've been looking for? Yes, Raphael replies. Thomas takes a step back to take in the whole painting, then he moves closer. I can't tell the difference between this and the claret violet from the factories. Raphael looks at him speechless. Thomas glances at the conch shells nearby and asks, Did you extract the color from those? Yeah, it's called Tyrian purple. It took 10,000 conches to get 1 gram. It's a completely different color than from claret violet. You can't tell the difference, Mr. Manager? Thomas scratches his head. Tyrian purple. Right. I know. Decades of art history have long since faded from Thomas's mind, but he vaguely remembers that Tyrian purple is a shade more precious than gold, only used by ancient royal families. But this color isn't rare anymore, Thomas says. After all, technology is so advanced now. It is rare, though. Raphael dabs his paintbrush and paints another stroke onto the painting. Do you remember the vermilion you were looking for so many years ago? Thomas doesn't turn around. It's been so many years. I gave up looking for it. Besides, no matter how much I try, I could never mix a color as great as yours. He snorts. A unique vermilion? Does that even exist? Of course it does, Raphael says. Vermilion is a super rare color in ancient times. You should know. Well, yes, because the process back then wasn't as developed, and they didn't have the technology. They could only use bugs to make that color. So they need to take into account the cost of catching them and storing the materials. It's a very expensive process, so of course it was rare. Thomas continues to calculate the total cost. It being labor intensive is one thing, but that's not the reason it's rare. Adding another stroke to the painting, Raphael continues. An insect can only give so much red to a painter's work. The vermilion nowadays can be easily synthesized with chemicals. Thomas doesn't understand Raphael's point. Isn't that great, though? More people can paint now. More paintings have the same pigment made from some factory at the same time, with the same chemicals and formulas, Raphael says. No matter how much these people mix or tweak their pigments, they will always be confined to a set of rules. The color they make no longer comes from a unique bug, just like how claret violet doesn't come from a unique conch. The works of the painters in the days of yore are priceless because of the scarcity of their paintings. No one can reproduce their works, which makes them unique. There's nothing more precious than being one of a kind in this world. The same goes for color. With that smear of Tyrian purple, Raphael puts away his brush and looks at Thomas. This is a unique color I found. Thomas is dumbfounded. He looks back at Raphael's painting, Tyrian purple and all, and it does seem a little different. Thomas can't tell what exactly had changed, but he knows this will be one of the most precious paintings in the world. A few months later, Raphael's painting is displayed in a grand exhibition. A young and aspiring artist stands in front of the artwork and sneers. They say the most fantastical part of this piece is the reddish purple, but I don't see a difference between this and the one I mix with normal paints. After sending a businessman away with a smile, Thomas frowns. He walks up to the painter, straightens his posture, and said, Let me tell you, sir, this painting before you, with that reddish purple, is painted by the one and only Mr. Raphael. He extracted this unique color from 10,000 conches, completely different from the manufactured one in your painting. That's what makes this shade fantastical. And that's one of the reasons why Mr. Raphael is legendary.